Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today we have breaking news that a major Ukrainian drone attack ended up being conducted onto an ammo depot inside of the area of Voronezh, and it appears that the damage has been incredibly serious according to video evidence that we got on the ground, as well as satellite footage that came out just hours later. What you're seeing in this video is a series of explosions that was being caused at an ammunition depot inside the Voronezh Oblast after Ukrainian drones ended up striking several facilities at the depot and spreading the flames throughout, creating massive explosions as ammunition began to cook off and the facility began to go up in flames. Now, many would say that the nighttime footage there doesn't really paint that great of a picture and doesn't really show us the severity of the damage that was actually caused to the surrounding area. The damage is in fact incredibly severe. From what we understand, the highway in between the cities of Voronezh and Luhansk have been completely shut down as the fire has spread from the ammunition depot and across the entirety of the surrounding area, setting the entire region ablaze for the large part and forcing 3 settlements to be evacuated, with a state of emergency being announced for the entire surrounding area. This is probably one of the biggest ammunition depot explosions that we've seen, at least in the area of land that it covers. And for this reason, we are able to understand that the explosive mass inside this ammunition depot had to have been very large, as it flung projectiles into a very large area surrounding the town. According to what we know, about 54 kilometers of the Voronezh-Luhansk highway is currently closed right now, and it does seem that we will be seeing that this ammunition depot fire probably carries on throughout today and probably a little bit on into tomorrow, as most of the ammunition inside of this depot will end up combusting and exploding over time and largely being destroyed. We have seen that this is not the first time that a major ammunition depot inside of Voronezh has been hit. Several months ago, we were able to see that near to the area of Ostrogosh, another ammunition depot ended up being targeted and destroyed in that area, and even further down, an ammunition depot at Olkavatka, which is one of the closest to Ukraine, was also attacked and destroyed as well, once again leading us to see that there's a reoccurring trend that the Ukrainians are continuously attacking and destroying the ammunition depots that are within this area. And you can also see satellite footage here of the before and after of the surrounding area after the ammunition depot exploded. You can see that's covering an incredibly large area. Now, something that's interesting with this is that multiple ammunition depots throughout the Voronezh Oblast specifically have been targeted and destroyed. There are loads of ammunition depots throughout the border region of Russia, in the Kursk and Belgorod Oblasts, in the Bryansk and Oriel regions, and even inside the Rostov-on-Don Oblast, but for some reason the Ukrainians really seem to single out and target the ones that are inside of Voronezh, and we have a fairly good reason to understand why they are doing that. From what we know, most of the munitions that are used by the Russians inside of the Donbass are most likely being transported from Voronezh and into Luhansk, and then further distributed to the front lines from the railheads. That's what we're understanding at this moment. We are highly doubting that any kind of actual ammunition movements or shipments are being conducted from Rostov-on-Don. Rostov-on-Don appears to largely be some sort of an oil transportation hub at this point in the war. We see some ammunition in that area, and every once in a while it does get targeted and destroyed. But from what we can tell, it largely seems as though the Rostov-on-Don area, considering its connection to the Volga River, all the way over at Volgograd, and also to the Don River through the entirety of the Rostov-on-Don Oblast, is really being used to try and ship in further fuel products that could be used by the Russian armed forces and the Russian citizenry to keep the nation alive. So it seems that the Russians are diverting their munitions from inside of Russia and funneling them through Voronezh and then into the Donbass. And this may be why we continue to see that these munition depots are targeted at a much higher frequency than ammunition depots anywhere else within the border region, is because this area is specifically conducing the movement of munitions and further supplies into Ukraine for the Russian military to be able to use. The damage has been incredibly significant today, and we will be trying to see even more footage from the ground later tonight or tomorrow to be able to give you all an even more adept and more detailed picture of the kind of real damage that was caused, and maybe even the tonnage of munitions that were lost in this massive blaze. But moving on from that, we were able to see that while the Kursk Oblast has been a little quiet lately, at least in terms of munitions attacks or deep strikes like we saw in Voronezh, we have seen that the Ukrainians are continuing on a little bit of their frontline efforts, as another pontoon bridge, one of the two that we know is currently standing, was hit and destroyed today by Ukrainian HIMARS attack. We were able to get footage of the HIMARS missile impacting the bridge. We're going to be muting that right there. But you can see the Buhanka trying to cross it. It appears that the bridge had already been uprooted and semi-submerged at this point. But as we can see the Buhanka crossing, just a little while later, literally right after a Buhanka moves on from the area, the HIMARS missile slams right into the middle of the pontoon bridge, which will sink that span and ensure that this little bridge will no longer be operational. And when I say little, this is one of the smallest pontoon bridges that we've actually seen inside the Kursk Oblast, but now we can see that it was completely submerged literally right after the explosion. You can see that right there. No longer usable by any stretch of the imagination. The Russians are now down once again to a single pontoon bridge in this area. We are expecting that they'll probably try and milk this pontoon bridge as much as they can, but there really isn't a lot of time for it. Considering that a HIMARS hit the other bridge, it's going to not be long, maybe even just a few hours, before this bridge span is hit as well, and then it is also knocked out. So we'll be trying to wait and see for the confirmation of the second bridge being destroyed probably here in a few hours. We'll probably get that by tonight's stream at 10 p.m. Eastern Time if it actually does happen. But nevertheless, the Russian brigade south of the Reka-Sim is once again in somewhat precarious trouble, logistically and reinforcements-wise, because everything has to go through one single bridge. Moving on from that area of news, and even further on and into Kyiv, we were also able to hear today that apparently the Iranians are going to be giving the Russians missiles, and quite a decent amount of them from what we've been told. Not just Shahed 136s, which are the kamikaze drones that many people have become familiar with. They are now going to be providing some form of missiles, and Ukraine is starting to threaten Iran heavily over this, and we were able to hear this today. A Ukrainian defense force said if civilians in Ukraine die from these missiles, then Iran will pay a double price for that. The response will be severe. But then they didn't really elaborate what the severe response would be. It still is very interesting, though, because it's once again leading us to see that the Ukrainians are taking the Iranians as a bit of a serious threat. And Iran, as far as Ukraine is concerned, is actually a somewhat serious threat. They have been providing a decent amount of Shahed 136 kamikaze drones to the Russian Federation throughout the entirety of the war, and now they're offering to provide missiles to the Russian Federation as well. Most likely as some sort of a fundraising venture, so that way they can try and further support and fund their own efforts that are going on inside the Middle East, most likely with the IRGC forces that are inside of Lebanon and also within the area of the West Bank currently. That may be the reason why the Iranians are trying to sell missiles to the Russians, but at the same time it appears that the Ukrainians are directly threatening the Islamic Republic of Iran, that if they take any further actions in support of Russia, they're going to be trying to inflict some form of consequence onto the Iranians in some form or some way, which is fairly interesting, and we're going to be waiting to see how that actually unfolds, but we are assuming that it will probably resort in Ukrainian special forces arriving in the Middle East and fighting their proxies around the area. We're not entirely sure how that would look, though, and we're going to have to get a lot more information as time goes on, but still, it is a very interesting thing that Ukraine is threatening such statements to the Islamic Republic of Iran. We have also been able to hear something a little bit concerning, speaking of possible Ukrainian special forces involvement in the Middle East. We've heard some very interesting statements today from the British MI6 and the American CIA about what the Russian Federation may be doing inside of Europe. And they are saying that there may be a campaign of reckless sabotage across the entirety of Europe being waged by the Russian Federation. They didn't really go into a lot of detail on this, but we are assuming that this has to do with the U.S. military bases being put on lockdown, and we also heard that at some point there was some sort of water poisoning that happened at another base that resulted in some pretty serious actions having to happen on the form of the security forces. It does seem as though the Russians would be leaning towards this, considering that outright attacks against the West would bode incredibly poorly, considering their lack of military power or any form of power projection. We are going to be assuming that any kind of actions they take will be covert. Like, for example, the attempted assassination of the Rheinmetall CEO that occurred a couple of months ago. And so we will be waiting to see how this unfolds as well. The CIA and the MI6 are most likely desperately trying to find any forms or any ways that the Russians may be trying to conduct sabotage amongst Western war industries or Western military bases inside of NATO in this area of Europe. But we will have to be trying to keep a little bit more of a vigilant eye out and see what the CIA and the MI6 are able to uncover or are able to unravel as far as the story goes with what the Russians may be trying to do inside of Europe at this point. We also have a small little update going on in the Middle East. There's not really any particular news that came out today that was of particular note, but we are still hearing that the Israelis are preparing for some sort of offensive actions against Hezbollah inside of southern Lebanon. We will be trying to wait and see if anything happens with that. Usually nothing has happened so far, but we are keeping an eye on that here on this channel, and if anything does happen, y'all will be the first to know. But nevertheless, that is all of the breaking news that we have for today. I've got to thank every single one of y'all once again for watching. If y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It makes us incredibly happy when folks do. Not that there's like any real benefit to it, and not that y'all have to. It's a free country. Y'all can do what y'all want. But if y'all would like to like, comment, and subscribe, it makes me and Enforcer Matt incredibly happy if y'all do. And not only that, if you really enjoy these little short war summary videos and you want to support them and help them to keep going, make sure to support us on Patreon. The link is in the description below for that. I have to give a massive shout out and a huge thanks to all of our patrons who are currently on Patreon right now, because y'all support helps to make this channel possible and helps us to be able to make these short war summaries possible whenever there's enough news to make them, like today. And hopefully we will be able to get onto a little bit more of a frequent upload schedule with these. The news has been a little bit intermittent, and usually the news is coming out more towards our stream time at 10 p.m. Eastern time than anything, so making these videos is somewhat difficult on a day-to-day basis, but hopefully we'll be able to pick this up like we have today a lot more often. But still, a big thanks to all of y'all once again for watching, and we will see y'all in the next one.